My name is Sue Simpson Gallagher, and I am the longest-standing member of the Buffalo Bill Art Show as of this time. Bob and Nancy Brown share a place, and Roger Murray. But I've been on for 26 years, and it's been a really wonderful experience. And part of the reason it's such a great experience is the people who have led the Buffalo Bill Art Show. And for the past many years, we've had Kathy Thompson, whose tireless efforts make the show possible. She's an arts advocate and an extraordinary director for the Buffalo Bill Art Show, a friend to artists and collectors, a purveyor of patience, I think, kindness, and a seller of art. And we are so lucky to have her. And her amazing assistant, Laurel Thompson. They're the Thompson twins, but Laurel has been a gift to all of us. Thank you, Laurel. And thank you too to Fran and Lennox Baker, who are sponsored the lunch and lecture today. They are incomparably generous members of our community and true patrons of the arts. So today, I'm honored to be the moderator of this incredible panel of women, and I'm going to I'm going to try and be brief, but it's hard to get all the information about these four, so they'll fill in for me. But I just want to give you a brief introduction for each of the panelists. Our first panelist is Neltje. She is an abstract painter who grew up in Long Island, or a few other places. I was just going to say back east. Okay. She chose to, in 1966, she chose to make Wyoming her home. She received the 2005 Governor's Arts Award of in Wyoming. She has created a variety of awards and programs to encourage writers and visual artists. She founded the Gentile Foundation, which supports artist residencies at her ranch in Banner, Wyoming. Her contribution to this state's cultural life is unbounded and inspirational. Neltje. And then my mom, I had her on my list last, but my mom, Ann Simpson, is from Grable, Wyoming. She graduated from Laramie High School. She met my dad at the University of, my dad is somewhere in the audience. His name is Al Simpson. And they met at the University of Wyoming. My dad enlisted in the Army, and they went to Germany, and it changed their lives. My mom became, they both actually became self-educated art historians. My mom spent her time off going to museums and cathedrals, learning everything she could about art. She gave us quizzes on art at the dining table from Time Life books. And my children and the grandchildren of our family receive money whenever we go to a museum and know the artist who painted the piece they're looking at. She became involved in the University of Wyoming Art Museum when Dad was in the Senate because of her encouragement of bringing art to communities that might otherwise not have access to original art. She came up with the idea of an artmobile traveling around the nearly 98,000 square miles of Wyoming, bringing art to classes, to schools and libraries, and that is now called the Ann Simpson Artmobile. She has the energy of 10, is a stellar salesperson, and is grace and beauty incarnate. Okay, no, Mom, you don't get to speak yet. Okay, and then we have Lindsey Linton Buck, who is from Powell, Wyoming. She is an artist, a photographer, and a fifth-generation Wyomingite. She discovered photography on a hiatus from her dance training. She lived in New York City and worked for famed photographers Rodney Smith and Peter Hurley. She chose to return to Wyoming in 2014 and commenced a project in photography called Wyoming and Art, Women in Wyoming. It tells inspiring stories of contemporary Wyoming women through art and media to celebrate achievements, power, and learned wisdom. That show has been 3 years in the making and will open here at the Buffalo Bill Center of the West on October 25th. We are all thrilled about that. And she's expecting a 6th generation Wyomingite in December. Karen Mcquarter is the Scarlet Curator of Western American Art at the Whitney Western Art Museum. She came to us from the Denver Art Museum. She's been an art history instructor, a guest lecturer, and a collections manager for a privately held art collection. She has written numerous articles on artists from all over the United States, living and deceased. She received her Bachelor of Arts from the University of Tennessee in Knoxville, where she specialized in studio art, and received her Master's in Arts and Art History with a concentration on museum studies from the University of Colorado. She is full of life and love of art and a true professional in the most personal way. So, these are 4 extraordinary women. And we are so honored that you're here with us. And I wrote down some questions before that I would like to ask them, the kind of things that I thought all of you would be interested in hearing from them. And this discussion was conceived of by Kathy Thompson in recognition of the 150th anniversary of Wyoming giving women the right to vote. So the first state to do so. And no matter what the reasons that became the truth, the reality is that it has made a difference in our state. I believe there has been an incredible, it's not even a hierarchy, but a beautiful happening of the acceptance and appreciation of women's roles in all varieties of life in this place. And so these women, having given their lives to art, have had a lifetime of experience. And in that, they've gathered wonderful moments. And so one of my first questions is, and if you don't mind Neltje, if we start with you, to ask what was one of the most inspiring moments in your art career?
I think my most...
Oh yeah, and Mom's going to give you that.
Hello. My most memorable one for me was in 1984. I was in Washington, D.C., and I went to a show at the Phillips. And it was, now I've forgotten it. This is with age, you learn to send your most treasured moment, what do you want to say, goes on vacation. And I'll get, that's why I have papers in front of me. Joan Mitchell. I went to a Joan Mitchell show, and I walked into a room that was ablaze with yellow strokes, small strokes, not big strokes, little strokes, one over the other, and then white space. And there was an electric energy in the painting. And I was, as the kids would say, I was blown away. She captured a combination of joy eclectic joy and electricity of anger. Think about it. It was quite a combination. It has stayed with me. I can see those paintings to this day. I started going to exhibitions of hers, and it became a way for me to study Sumi, which is learning about marks, making marks with India ink on rice paper. And it has given me a way of life. It was wonderful. Thank you.
One of my first wonderful art experiences was soon after Al and I were married in 1954. He was sent to Fort Benning, Georgia, and then on to Germany, and I accompanied him. And we were fortunate enough to live in Germany for 2 years, and as a young Wyoming girl who had never traveled much. But because I, of all the wives, having driven in Wyoming all the time, I was the driver for everywhere. So we went to Munich to the Picasso show, and I had never really, I'd known of Picasso and even had a little print of his that I bought when I was teaching school, and it blew me away. Since then, I have gone to Picasso exhibits and found I was not any longer a Picasso fan. But at that time, I loved his work. And because we had not very little money, the way most of us do when we start out, art museums were our hobby. And we went to art museums all over Europe.
Thanks.
When I was a student at Northwest College in Powell, there were some posters on the studio wall from a photographer named Rodney Smith, and some of you may know him in this room. Amazing photographer and artist. He shot all film, and his photographs were, they always told a story. They were romantic, they were playful, beautiful images. And I signed up for his newsletter, and they sent out this workshop they were doing in Buenos Aires. And I'm a big believer in the cold call, so I called up his studio and said, "Hi, I'm Lindsey, I live in Wyoming. Do you need any assistance for your workshop?" So it was like $15,000 to go to his workshop, and they were like, "That's cute, no." But we're always looking for interns. Why don't you send us your portfolio and Rodney will take a look. And I ended up spending that summer in New York with Rodney at his studio, which was just such a powerful experience for me because it's what got me to New York. I stayed in New York for 3 years after that. The experience itself, I went into it thinking, oh, I'm just gonna learn everything from my idol and my photographer. He's gonna teach me so much. We had one shoot the entire summer. It was the first day that I worked there. The rest of the time, the mentorship consisted of Rodney taking me on drives, asking me about myself and my life and who I was. I was really annoyed because I wanted to learn about technique and lighting and all the nuts and bolts. And he would just impress upon me that to be an artist, you really have to know yourself and to find out who you are and what you want to say and to just take beautiful photos. And that's something that stuck with me whenever I felt stuck or, when you do get in that place where you think you need XYZ before you can reach the final result, is just to know yourself really deeply and get closer and closer to that and to take beautiful photos at the end of the day.
Thank you.
Firstly, I just want to say how honored I am to sit here with these fabulous women. Thank you for convening us. An inspiring moment that comes to mind for me is actually less about an experience with a work of art and rather about an experience with a group of people who are passionate about arts in general. Last spring, I was invited to be a part of the Getty Leadership Institute's Next Gen Executive Education Program. During this time, I was one of 35 emerging museum leaders thrilled to be part of that cohort who spent 1 month diving into the reasons why we do what we do and how we can do better into the future. These 35 colleagues of mine, now great friends, hail from across the world, from Asia, Europe, and many from America. And I think about that experience on an almost daily basis and was reminded during that time and constantly now why I'm in the field that I am. It's really to connect people with the art of these incredible makers, to help share their stories and to bring art to the people, to enliven it for them. And this particular group just absolutely inspired me to reconnect with that focus.
So I wrote quite a few questions, and I want them all to be answered, but I don't think it's possible. So I'm going to have to, I just want to skip to this one because I'm so curious, because museums are a part of all of our lives. So I do have the question of what is your favorite museum and why? Karen?
I'll start. Obviously, the Whitney Western Art Museum. Of course. Actually, though, really, I sat in the Whitney at age 12, and then again when I was later in my teens, and admired the space. Couldn't have imagined that one day I would be given the incredible task of stewarding the collection that hangs on the walls and sits on the pedestals. I'm thrilled. So the Whitney is certainly my favorite museum, but my favorite museum otherwise changes on an almost monthly basis because I'm thrilled to travel a lot for my job, and on every trip that I take, I make sure to visit as many museums as I possibly can, and I admire almost every one of them. There's something to learn from every institution, something to admire about the way they produce programming, the way they showcase and interpret their art. A couple favorites, though, that I always keep coming back to are the Art Institute of Chicago, the d'Orsay in Paris. I was inspired, like Sue was as a young person, in Europe. It's why I am where I am. My parents helped me save money for trips to go to Europe and visit those museums. So those are a couple favorites of mine.
When I'm in New York, I love the Guggenheim. I love the intimacy of that space. I saw an amazing exhibit there. It was a few years ago now. It's James Tyrell. He works with light. And it was, if you've been in that museum, it's like an open shell. And the exhibit was, the installation was so simple. It was just gradients of light shifting really, really slowly. And it was, everyone just sat in the foyer for, I mean, some people for hours. It was so hypnotic and simple and powerful. And as a photographer, you know, light is your main tool of communication. So I always love going to that venue, and then I've got to toot the center of the West Horn here as well. Growing up in Powell, you know, I just think this space is so impressionable, and when I envisioned my project, Women in Wyoming, before I even started production, this was my dream venue. And I reached out to Karen actually and was like, hey, I'm gonna be producing this series, how do I get a show here? So it's been an amazing, this incredible process for me to get to execute this vision with this incredible venue.
Well, my favorite is the National Gallery in Washington, because I believe that they have the finest quality of art. They represent so many eras of art, but we have had the good fortune during our Senate life of traveling all over the world, and of course we were always taken to fine museums. But I do believe the National Gallery has the finest collection there is in the world.
Well, I'm impressed by everybody's selection. My favorite ones are the Whitney Museum in New York, which in about 2.5 days is going to be the new Whitney. And that's a new building and a new showcase. But the new Whitney, or the Whitney Museum, and the MoMA Museum in New York provide not only a history of contemporary work, but a constant motion of what is happening now. And that teaches us to be thoughtful, to be open to change. I found for myself as a painter, I have looked at certain paintings and over the years and thought them, I don't know why somebody bothered to paint that. In my non-judgmental way. And then I find that I am sort of drawn to painting like that 2 years later. Then I don't sleep for a while. So those are my two favorite, and then when I'm in Denver, I go to the Denver Art Museum. I also go to the Still Museum. But it depends on my mood. So to say something is the best is impossible for me. I'm sorry.
No, that's great.
I don't
was
fit
like
in this bag.
It was a survey question anyway. So Mom, why don't you pick up and then we'll go around that way. How about a person that you would consider, an individual who had a major impact on your life in art? It could be a mentor, could be an artist.
My grandfather, Colin Mackenzie, was a self-taught artist. And I still, whenever I smell turpentine, I think of him because he used his handkerchief to clean his brushes and then put it back in his pocket. He was a dear, wonderful man. And he painted and loved painting. And we all had his pictures hanging in our house and still do. And he did very well. His brother was a very, very accomplished artist who died in his 30s, unfortunately. But that was my first introduction in the fact I grew up feeling that art was such an important thing to have in your life. And then, of course, I decided to be an art major because I wanted to be in interior design, and my standards were too high, so I quit. I decided to be an art appreciator instead of an artist. So, and I think my mentor at this stage is a young woman who owns an art gallery here in town named Simpson Gallagher.
New York was a pretty powerful experience for me. So Rodney got me out to New York, but really my main mentorship was working for a photographer named Peter Hurley. He's very much in the commercial realm. He teaches all around the world. He's known as really the modern authority on how to take a contemporary headshot, which I really had no interest in, but he was the only photographer that called me back and needed an assistant. However, that experience was so empowering and allowed me, when I moved back to Wyoming, I had this skill that I could sell and start my business. Working for Peter as well, he was photographing 3 people a day, 4 days a week, inventing his own lighting, teaching, starting these workshops, which are now worldwide. He is very much an entrepreneur and just had an idea and would run with it. And for me, that was really impactful to be around someone where I was just seeing constantly putting his ideas into motion, not necessarily having everything planned out. And I think Wyoming demands a certain entrepreneurialism and creativity, and I've certainly had to reinvent myself several times being back, and so I've really applied that just kind of jumping headfirst attitude into my business, into my projects. So he was just such a huge, he was so impactful for me.
I have to mention 2, but I'll make it pretty brief. The first of those is Peter H Pastrick, who you all know and love. Peter gave me my first opportunity in the field of Western American art, and I can't express to you, you all may already know, how encouraging he has been of the next generation of Western American art historians. He also has literally written the book on many of the artists we know and love. I recall driving from Boulder, where I was in school, to Denver to interview Peter while I was in grad school. I had kind of lost my way. I went to CU Boulder to study Italian Renaissance art under a Leonardo scholar, and was promptly advised to look elsewhere because there were no jobs in Italian Renaissance art history. There are many Leonardo scholars out there. So I thought, well, I love the West. I love Western American art, and looking around, I didn't see many faces like my own. There weren't many young people studying the subject. So I drove down the road to Denver to interview Peter, who was then at the helm at the Denver Art Museum. And our interview lasted quite a while, longer than I would have expected. He was so gracious with his time. And during the course of the interview, he offered me a fellowship at the Denver Art Museum, which I accepted, and it truly set in motion what has become my life's passion in my career. So I am endlessly thankful to Peter, both for his support of me and of others. And I also have to mention Patricia Nelson, Patty Limerick, who is my favorite historian, has done much to challenge the way we look at Western American history, and is a committed advocate of public discourse and creates spaces for civil dialogue. And I honor that commitment. I also just so appreciate her legendary sense of humor and a wit that only someone with her level of intelligence can possess. So those two people have indelibly shaped my career.
Neltje, you don't have to choose just one.
I don't have to choose.
No, you can give us a couple.
Well, the first one was actually my sister, who, I had one sister who was a painter, and I had one sister who is a writer. She's still alive. She's 96. And it was the fact that they were different from my family, from my mother, from my father. They were my half-sisters, but they were different because they were artists, and they thought differently. And they were treated differently. But they were true to who they were, in the sense that my parents never were, in the sense of knowing who you are and promoting who you are through a creative process. And as I'm talking about it, I'm thinking and wondering whether that's true because my father was a publisher, book publisher, and that comes pretty close to being an author. So I may be lying.
We could wrap it up on that, but we're thank you. But we're not going to. I have two more questions. Okay. So in that, those responses are unbelievably articulate and thoughtful. Thank you. And speaking of being articulate, so if you were to carry around a quote about art or the artist's life or the power of creativity in your pocket, in your wallet, and I did give them a crap on this, what would it be? And who would like to start?
Well, Susan, at one time we had a birthday party for Al, and she made a laundry list of life for both of us. But I just think of all the things that people begin, it's just a seed, and they sprout and grow. And I think of the phrase, to do a thing, be at it. And then the other one, bloom where you're planted.
So I'll start with one, see if I have time for two. The first is actually from a Netflix show called Afterlife, so I'm bringing in maybe something that you all haven't heard. But it's a show with Ricky Gervais, it's fabulous. It's a dark comedy. But there's a quote in the show that goes something like, "A society grows great when its old men," and I would say old women, "plant trees, the shade of which they know they will never enjoy." it's not necessarily about art, it's just about how I would like to live my life and how I know these women are living their lives. It's about doing good for other people. It's about providing beauty. It's about provoking thought. It's about leaving this place better than how we found it. I also love a quote from Viola Davis. If you all know and love her from How to Get Away with Murder, she's a great actress. She's referenced in several interviews what she calls 3 famous words, and now what? Not to say that I don't enjoy the present moment and I don't reflect thoughtfully on the past, but I love being challenged. And now what? What am I going to do to improve myself personally, professionally? How can I better reach audiences in the Whitney? What can we do next? So I appreciate a challenge, and I love that Viola has asked us all to think, and now what?
One of my mantras, especially moving back to Wyoming and deciding to build my career here, is tell the story only you can tell. It took me a while, even to, once I was back in Wyoming, to really accept that, okay, this is where I'm gonna be. I was still going to Denver every quarter, shooting there, reaching out to editors in New York and LA. And eventually, I was talking to this, he photographs a lot of movie posters in LA, like the X-Men posters and everything, and asking him, how do I do what you do? And he's like, just tell the story only you can tell. And that has been so powerful for me, especially with this project. I think as an artist, once you start putting an idea into motion, it demands every part of you. And so the motivation has to be so deep and so true to keep going and to persevere through the obstacles that you are going to face. So that's one that I tell myself a lot.
There's a quote from Philip Guston, and it has been handed down in a variety of ways, but the nubbin of it is, I go in my studio, and in the first half hour, I get rid of my family and let them walk out the door. In the second half hour, I get rid of my peers who talk to me constantly and judge me. And in my third half hour, if I'm very lucky, I get rid of myself. And that's very true. And you have to keep painting and painting and painting to get to that position. Thank you.
Thank you.
One little postscript that reflects this. When I was raising my children, it was, go to your room till you can come out and be nice.
I don't remember spending a lot of time in my room, but I wanted to. Nice. It's a lot more than just being nice. You believed in, kindness. It's what they're all talking about, right? Non-judgment. I mean, Neltje, you said it, you were funny, but that's what we're all striving for, right? To be able to grow as individuals, as creative people, as members of a community. And you four are stellar examples of how that's been manifested in a creative life. So, in that creative life, you have chosen to live in Wyoming. What is the line? The state of great low multitudes and, Dad, what's the line?
High altitude and low multitude.
That's it. Stay high altitude and low multitude. But in choosing to stay in this incredible place, which Mike Sullivan, what is his line, or it might be yours too, about the long streets? What's that one?
That's Sullivan.
Mike, what's that one?
Town with unusually long streets.
Yes, the state of Wyoming, a town with unusually long streets. Mike Sullivan used to warn me when I lived in New York City, don't do anything you would regret, because you know when you turn around, someone from Wyoming will be walking across the street. So thank you so much. And in that, choosing to live in Wyoming, how has that affected your career in any way you choose to discuss?
It's given me massive.
Neltje, will you take the mic? Thank you.
It's given me freedom to live. I came from New York City. I was born on Long Island, in New York City, and lived on Long Island. And I was a proper wife. I got over it. Thank you.
I think living in Wyoming and the fact that we have a small population, that we all have to work together. And I grew up in a family that wanted to make the place we lived a good place. And that's how I've lived, and this is how I see my children live. And I think everyone in this room is that way. We want this museum and this town to be a good place. And I am so impressed with the entrepreneurial spirit of women in this town. And you too, girls.
This town of Wyoming.
Yes, Wyoming town.
Down in Wyoming.
Yeah, it's been a very full circle journey for me, because growing up, I never imagined I would have a future in Wyoming. I always thought I would have to leave, especially to be successful as a creative. But Wyoming kept pulling me back, first for photo school, then after New York. I still didn't think I would stay, but eventually decided to question that idea of Wyoming as limiting. It's what spurred the idea to travel thousands of miles all across the state to connect with my peers and learn how they were stretching themselves and fulfilling themselves fully in Wyoming. So it's been amazing to sort of flip that perspective and now feel so creatively challenged here. And I think, you know, everywhere has its challenges, but I think Wyoming is a place that really can breed creativity and entrepreneurialism, because you have to step forward. And I also think there's so much opportunity, because we're small scale, to make that direct impact. That's something that's really exciting to me, to just be able to create something that can, doesn't get lost in the masses. Like when you're in New York City and competing with 5,000 people, you can have a voice here and it can be heard.
Oh, Karen.
Well, I'm a Tennessee girl, but I have long had a Western spirit ever since I was introduced to this region as a teenager. Yes, exactly. Fringe. Yeah. I've come full circle. And the West in general has entirely inspired and allowed for my career. I owe it everything. And Wyoming specifically has given me the opportunity of a lifetime in this position as the curator of the Whitney Western Art Museum. I was introduced with greater challenges and more freedom and responsibility than I'd ever been given. And I appreciated the tall order of wrangling that. And truly, I mean, it's cliche, but there is space to spread your professional wings here if you have the gall and the passion to do it. And what I've found, especially here at the center, is that if you have a great idea, and I'm sure this applies to Wyoming, if you have a great idea and you can rally passionate people around you, you can accomplish anything. And to Mike's point and others, I've never felt more a part of a community than I do here. This is the kind of place where you can make a difference and actually see the fruits of your labor enjoyed by others. I was never on many committees. I didn't serve on boards, and now it's really hard to find time to serve on all the boards I'd like to. So I love that about Wyoming, and I'm so thankful to have been given the opportunity to work here.
Thank you all. I thought you might have some questions of these four extraordinary women. So I'd like to take some questions. Well, are you willing to take questions from the audience? Great. Okay. Anne?
So, let's face it, men rule the art world. From the number of artists, educators, publishers, decision makers, on committees, who gets into what show, blah, blah, blah. How have you individually fought to overcome that stigma of being a woman in the arts?
Honestly, for me creatively, I don't think it's ever been an issue, especially for my work in portraiture, and I'd say 90% of my clients are women. It's a huge advantage because, especially with a portrait, you have to be vulnerable, create trust. So I think it's a huge advantage to be a woman. I will say with this show, it's been pretty awesome because Karen is one of my co-curators, Rebecca West is my other co-curator for Women in Wyoming. This institution has been so incredibly supportive. We are pitching the work to other shows around the state. It hasn't been picked up yet, so I feel really lucky that basically back in 2017 when I launched the series, after talking to you in 2016, said, hey Karen, will you consider this project while I'm still in production? They jumped on it. And I think that is having women at the table and recognizing, and supporting women artists. So I feel it's pretty awesome to be a young contemporary artist, woman artist, and get to debut my work here.
I think for me it's about trying to be a good mentor to others, to women who are coming up in the field. Many of those are interns of ours, and as much as I can to support them and help give them a leg up as I was given, I try to do that. And as well, choosing projects like Lindsey Linton's exhibition, like as well the Laura Wilson exhibition that we hosted several years ago, aligning myself with creators, creatives, with professionals and peers who inspire me and who I think will inspire others. So it's the support that I can offer. Also working to diversify the Whitney's collection and attack in, especially interpretation, oftentimes absence of women artists on the wall and on pedestals.
What was your question again?
I'll let you.
Okay, the question was, the art world is obviously dominated by men, and how does that affect your careers with them, but your ability to make a difference? I guess I would say in Mom's case.
Well, I don't know that that's particularly relevant in Wyoming, because I think Wyoming women are often the ones who are in charge of the galleries and pushing for things and serving on committees. The amount of volunteer work that the women in this room, especially, is awesome to me. So I think they have a very, very strong influence.
Well, I found when I had the Sheraton Inn and tried to get something done, I found out it was a man's world, loud and clear. And I think, I remember being at a meeting, and I was on several committees, and I was asked, what does your table want to represent for the future of Sheraton in 2000 and whatever it was, 80, it was going to be 100 years. And I said, getting rid of the old boy society, you could hear not a sound. It's still there. And unfortunately, it sometimes doesn't work very well. It's not always bad, but sometimes it doesn't work very well.
Thank you. Is there another question? Okay.
How do women get in the way of other women?
That's a really good question.
Wow.
That's a really good question. I'm sure, and we know well that men get in the way of other men. But in both cases, I think, it's about leaning in. It's about supporting other women and recognizing that when one person succeeds, when one of your peers succeeds, we all succeed. So it certainly is about collegiality, it's about support, it's about a bit of selflessness and a focus on the greater good.
I also think there can be this thought, oh, we're all women, we all think the same, we have the same values, we all want the same things. We're incredibly multifaceted and we're individuals. I know from my own experience, I remember when I started speaking about the project to women's groups, I remember the first couple times going in and feeling like, oh, well, I'm talking to my people, this is gonna be great. And I would look around the room and there'd be ladies glaring at me, and I was like, okay, if I can reach one person in this audience, then I've done my job. And I've just come to accept that, it's not my job to please everyone. Not everyone has to agree with or like what I'm doing. And, obviously if we can all support each other more, that's wonderful, but we also have different values and beliefs, and that's okay too.
I spent 20 years on the board of the University of Wyoming Art Museum, and most of our members were women. And we did have about 4 men on our board who worked very well with us. And I do not remember a feeling of competitiveness. We had a very warm working relationship, which I helped create. And we thought we were the best board at the university. And of course we were. That's right. And I just do not remember a feeling of competitiveness. Of course, I was president at that time. So, but because we tried to keep it a family situation, I think perhaps that's a little different than the way men might operate, although theirs is club-like too. But I think the most effective organizations are the ones where people become friends and they work together, and that's what's happening with our government right now. They're not friends.
Neltje, you already did, yes. Okay, so in wrapping up, I wrote down a few notes about things that were said that touched me, and I think about Neltje saying about being thoughtful and open to change, and how seeing that contemporary exhibit made her think, and about Karen's speaking to kindness, and about Lindsey speaking to knowing yourself, and moms to do a thing, be at it, which used to drive me crazy, because when you'd complain about all you had to do, that's what she'd say. So I think what that is this personal perspective. And sometimes as a business owner, I think about professionalism, professional and personal, and how people are often talking about how professional someone is. And if that means that someone is efficient or on time or has the budget ready on time, okay, that's fine. But if you want to talk about professions and what these people have done as professionals, it's all personal. And I think it's really important that we all don't judge each other about the way we work, about the way we operate in the world, because we all are here offering something, and it's also individual. And our gift to one another is to appreciate our differences and come together in that. So thank you for being great stewards of a philosophy that I appreciate, and being patrons of the arts, and sustaining our creative life in this community. Thank you.